Hello again, Pastor Ben Meller from Buckville Bible Church. In today's video, we'll be looking at Marx's ninth plank in the Communist Manifesto. So let's get right into it. Marx says, combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries, gradual abolishment of the distinction between town and country by more equable distribution of the population over the country. So what Marx is saying is that he wants the manufacturing and the agriculture to work closer together, and that he wants, in order to do this, or as part of that, he wants to even out the population. So he wants to move people out of the city, put them in the country, and just kind of make an even spread of population, which sounds good, but the question again is, how is he going to do that, and is it really going to work out that well? The only way that can happen is if the government forces people to move. So the government has to say, you know what, you live in this house, but you can't live here anymore. You have to go live over here, and you have to have this job. And you lived over here, you can't have this job anymore. You have to go over here and do this job. And so the government forces and tells people and is going to move huge numbers of people to different places, displaced people. And usually when that happens, that leads to a lot of economic misery as well as deaths. And we can even see this in more ancient history. For example, when the Assyrians invaded took over the northern part of Israel, they picked up the tribes and they moved them all someplace else, and a lot of people died and suffered. We see this with the Babylonian captivity in the southern tribe of Judah, where the Babylonians take them away. And we think of all the people who die in the process and really the economic poverty they suffered. So that's really what you kind of see here, because you have the government dictating it. Now we know that people move, we know that there could be mass migrations of people that is not controlled by the government, right? For example, the Dust Bowl. Nobody told the people during the Dust Bowl to migrate. They just did because of circumstances. We see this also in Scripture, say with the book of Ruth, right? We see early on in the book of Ruth, Elimelech and Naomi. All right, there's a famine in Judah, so they go to Moab, where one of their sons marries Ruth, and then he dies, and then Elimelech dies, so Naomi and Ruth, they come back, and you get the story of Ruth, who's part of the line of David. Okay, and there's again an example of people moving because of famine or extenuating circumstances, but they are allowed to move based on where they think they can better their lives or their livelihood. And when that happens, things tend to move a lot more smoothly. Though sometimes the reason people migrate is because people are dying because of famine, right? But notice that's not a hardship caused by government. That's just natural hardships that are caused, that are part of living with this life. And it really is the best way to deal with them is to allow people to move freely, go new places, get different jobs, and let the market determine what happens, as opposed to the government. Because we can certainly see in places like Communist China where they try these types of things, where millions of people die of starvation and just misery. Because you're moving people up, you're uprooting them, and you're making them go someplace else against their will. And we even see again in our United States Constitution, I think in both the Third and Fourth Amendments, we see some guidelines put in place that would keep the government from doing what Marx is suggesting. So the Third Amendment says, no soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in the time of war, but in the manner to be prescribed by law. Now you may say, now what does that actually have to do, Pastor Ben, with redistributing the population? Well, you have to understand history, okay? And so in that time frame, at least still fresh in the mind of a lot of the settlers in the United States, was that the idea of quartering troops in somebody else's house when a monarch would do that was really a form of punishment, because you're bringing a lot of times unmarried men into the home, and really it was the family's job to provide for them food and comfort, and it also a lot of times meant the women would end up getting raped. And so it just wasn't a situation that people were going to tolerate. So what they would do is they would just end up and they would have to move, because there was no way they could support themselves, and it wasn't safe for their family. So it would force them to leave the country. In fact, the French king did this particularly to the Huguenots in France. If you think of back to the 30 Years' War in France, this is something that took place. And that's why this amendment was put in the Constitution, because it's just it's an unfair burden on people, which really ultimately forces them out of their own homes, and really is a way of forcing people you don't like, without actually making a law telling them they have to leave, go away. And that's just, our fathers didn't think that was okay. They didn't believe that was right. And of course we see in the Fourth Amendment, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, effects against unreasonable search, and seizure, which is what you're going to have. If the government's forcing mass numbers of population to move against their will, they're going to what? They're going to have to seize their property, and they're going to have to seize somebody else's property to give them that property when they move. And it just doesn't really work out that terribly well. And so, our founders had the wisdom and the foresight to put these things in the amendment. And again, we just see that Marxism doesn't really jive with the United States Constitution. And so our answer, should the government tell you where you should live, is no. The government should not tell you where to live. That's not the government's job. That is much better regulated by the free market. And why not? And why shouldn't people be free if they want to live in the city where everything is cramped? They should be free to do so. If they want to live in the country, they should be free to make those decisions. And I think that is an important thing we see, just the idea itself of freedom even throughout Scripture. I'm Pastor Ben Miller. Till next time, live long and prosper.